Not every person who enters the avoidance life reaches the place where genuine, deep love becomes possible. This is not a judgment on the worth of the people who do not reach it. It is a statement about the avoidance psychology and the specific, narrow conditions under which their capacity for deep love becomes accessible at all. The avoidant has love available. It is not that they are incapable of the feeling, not that the emotional depth required for genuine attachment is simply absent in them as it might be absent in someone with a fundamentally different psychological structure. The capacity is present. What is absent in most circumstances is the specific combination of conditions that allows the capacity to be reached. Most relationships with the avoidant do not reach it. They reach the surface layer, the warmth, the charm, the genuine but carefully managed engagement of someone who is present enough to create the impression of deep connection without ever crossing into the territory where deep connection actually lives. The person on the receiving end of this surface layer often believes they are experiencing genuine intimacy because the avoidance surface layer is more sophisticated and more personally attentive than the genuine intimacy offered by many people with less defended attachment styles. It feels real. It is real at the level it operates, but it is not the deepest thing the avoidant is capable of. It is the deepest thing they are currently willing to offer. The person who reaches below the surface layer, who arrives through the specific combination of who they are at the place where the avoidant's genuine, deep love becomes possible, is not doing anything designed to reach it. They are not strategizing their way past the defenses. They are not performing the qualities that unlock the avoidant's deeper capacity. They simply are, in the most complete and uncontrived sense, a particular kind of person. And the particularity of who they are is what makes the difference. They have made peace with their own darkness. The avoidant's interior life is not uncomplicated. Beneath the composed, self-sufficient exterior, beneath the performance of someone who has their life arranged and their emotions managed and their needs adequately met without requiring significant external input, there is a complexity that the performance exists in part to conceal. The fear that does not have an acceptable social form, the grief that was never processed because processing it would have required a vulnerability that was never safe, the longing that is most comprehensively denied because it is most comprehensively present, the parts of themselves that do not fit the narrative of the capable, independent, self-contained person they have constructed for public and private consumption. The avoidant is, in ways they do not always have language for, ashamed of this complexity. Not the intellectual acknowledgement of having had difficult experiences or challenging emotional history. The avoidant can discuss these things with a composure that is itself a form of protection. But the felt, lived, currently present reality of the interior, the fear that is not historical but ongoing, the need that is not theoretical but active, the longing that persists despite every effort to reason or manage it into a more acceptable shape. This is the part they hide from others and as much as possible from themselves. The person the avoidant falls into genuine, deep love with has done something with their own equivalent interior that the avoidant has not yet done with theirs, and that the avoidant, in watching them, begins to understand is possible. They have made peace with their darkness. Not conquered it, not resolved it into the clean, positive narrative that a certain kind of self-help promises, not arrived at a place where the difficult parts of themselves no longer exist or no longer cost anything, but accepted it, integrated it into a whole self that acknowledges the complexity without being defined by shame about it. They carry their wounds without hiding them and without performing them. They know where they are broken, and they have, in the deep and private way of genuine self-knowledge, made their accommodation with the breaking. This quality undoes the avoidant in a specific and profound way, because the avoidant's shame about their own interior is maintained, in part, by the belief that what they carry is uniquely unacceptable, that the fear and the need and the longing are evidence of a fundamental inadequacy that genuine self-possession would have resolved. Encountering someone who carries equivalent complexity or greater with the equanimity of genuine self-acceptance dismantles this belief without requiring any direct challenge to it. It is the demonstration rather than the argument. The living proof that the interior does not have to be hidden to be survivable, that the self does not have to be managed into acceptability in order to be worth loving. In the presence of this person, the avoidance shame begins slowly, non-linearly, with many reversals, to loosen. And the loosening of the shame is the beginning of the access to the deeper love. They are interested in the avoidance mind, not just their mystery. The avoidance self-containment generates a particular kind of attraction in many people. The unavailability reads as depth. The composure reads as strength. The managed distance creates an allure of the unreachable that draws certain people toward the avoidant with an intensity that is about the mystery rather than the person. These people are attracted to the performance, to the projected image of someone who holds more than they reveal, who is more interesting, more complex, more worth knowing than the available evidence can fully confirm or deny. The avoidant knows this. They can feel the difference between someone who is drawn to the mystery and someone who is interested in the actual contents of the mystery. And they are, despite the self-sufficiency they perform, quietly hungry for the latter. For the person whose curiosity is directed not at the image they project, but at the actual, specific, complicated interior that the image was constructed to protect. The person the avoidant falls into genuine love with is interested in their mind. Not in a generic intellectual sense, not simply in the shared enjoyment of ideas as a pleasurable and sufficiently impersonal form of engagement, but in the specific, personal, relentlessly curious sense of someone who wants to know how the avoidant actually thinks, what they actually believe beneath the positions they have found it comfortable to present, how they arrived at the views they hold, what the interior of their experience of the world, their particular way of processing and making sense of what they encounter, actually looks like when it is not being managed for an audience. This curiosity is different from the attraction to the mystery because it requires the mystery to resolve into an actual person, and it remains interested after the resolution. The person who is drawn to the mystery loses interest when the mystery becomes knowable. The person who is interested in the mind becomes more interested as knowing deepens. Every revelation of the actual avoidant, every moment in which the managed presentation gives way to the genuine interior, generates more curiosity rather than less. The interest is not satisfied by access. It is amplified by it. And for the avoidant, who has lived their relational life with the low-level certainty that the actual version of themselves, the unmanaged, unperforming, genuinely complex interior version, is less interesting and less lovable than the projected image, this sustained and deepening interest in the actual is revolutionary. It contradicts the foundational belief at the heart of the avoidance self-protective strategy. It demonstrates, through the evidence of consistent behavior, rather than through any reassuring declaration, that the real version of themselves is not only tolerable to another person, but actively, specifically, increasingly valued. This is not something the avoidant can simply receive without disruption. It destabilizes the architecture. It challenges the narrative. It makes the walls feel, for the first time with genuine force, less like protection and more like the thing standing between them and the life that this person's interest is making visible as possible. They love without making the love a weapon. The avoidant has a complicated and largely painful history with being loved. Not because the love itself was painful, though in some cases the specific forms it took were, but because of what the love in the avoidance experience has tended to come attached to. The love that arrived with expectations whose non-fulfillment generated visible suffering. The love that was expressed as a form of pressure. The implicit or explicit message that the loving obligated the avoidant to reciprocate in specific, measurable, consistently maintained ways. The love that, when the avoidance attachment system inevitably generated the retreat, became the source of the guilt and the shame and the specific accusation that the avoidant was broken or cold or incapable of real feeling. This history has installed in the avoidant a deep and largely unconscious association between being loved and being in debt. Being loved means owing something. It means the other person's emotional state has become partially the avoidant's responsibility. It means the warmth that arrives is not free. It carries an implicit invoice that the avoidant, whose system cannot always process the currency the invoice is written in, will eventually be unable to pay. And the inability to pay will generate the withdrawal, and the withdrawal will generate the accusation, and the accusation will confirm the avoidant's deepest fear about themselves. The person the avoidant falls into genuine love with does not do this. Their love arrives without the invoice. Not because they have no needs. They have needs clearly and honestly held. But because their needs are expressed as genuine information about themselves rather than as obligations placed on the avoidant. They love without making the love a demonstration of what the avoidant owes them, without making the avoidant's receipt of their care into a binding agreement, without reaching for the love as a lever in the moments when the avoidant's fear generates the retreat. This quality is so rare in the avoidance experience that its presence is almost disorienting. Love, in their history, has always had conditions, stated or unstated, conscious or unconscious, but present. Love that arrives without conditions is a category their experience has not prepared them for. It requires a reordering of the fundamental assumption that being loved means being in debt. And the reordering, however gradual and however frequently interrupted by the old patterns, creates the specific internal condition under which the avoidant's own love is most able to move from the suppressed interior where it has always lived toward the expressed exterior where it has always been most needed. They are living a life that does not wait for the avoidant to be ready. The final quality is perhaps the most counterintuitive because it looks on the surface like a form of indifference, like someone who does not care enough about the avoidant to make them a priority. But what it actually represents is the opposite of indifference. It is the most mature, most self-respecting, most ultimately loving posture available to someone in relationship with an avoidant. The person the avoidant falls into genuine love with is living their life, fully, committedly, with the whole of their energy and attention directed at the building of something that is genuinely theirs, not held in suspension while they wait for the avoidant to arrive at the readiness that commitment requires. They have ambitions that are active, friendships that are nurtured, a relationship with their own becoming that takes genuine priority. They are not available at all times and in all configurations. They are not organized around the avoidant's schedule, the avoidant's emotional availability, the avoidant's readiness to engage. They are organized around their own life. And the avoidant is, if the avoidant chooses, welcome in that life, on terms that respect both people's wholeness. This posture does something to the avoidant system that waiting, pursuing, and organizing around the avoidant never does. It removes the pressure. Not the pressure of the relationship's demands, the pressure of being someone's primary hope, the specific, suffocating pressure of being the person on whom another person's life is contingent. The avoidant who has been loved by someone who waited, who made the avoidant's readiness the condition of their own full engagement with life, has always felt, beneath whatever warmth the love generated, the specific weight of that contingency. The knowledge, however uncomfortable to acknowledge, that the other person's life is paused, that the pausing is, in some operational sense, their responsibility. That the love is a form of waiting that the avoidant has not invited and cannot fully honor and cannot, without significant guilt, simply disregard. The person who is living without waiting does not place this weight on the avoidant. Their life is not contingent. Their fullness does not require the avoidant's participation to sustain itself. And the removal of the contingency, the experience of being loved by someone who is fully alive regardless of what the avoidant decides, is one of the most profound relational reliefs the avoidant has ever experienced. In that relief, in the specific spaciousness of being wanted without being needed, being invited without being obligated, being loved without the love becoming a weight, the avoidant's deepest love finds the conditions it has always required but never before had. Room to be real. Room to move toward rather than away. Room to become, finally, and without the urgency of someone else's contingency, pressing on the pace of the becoming, the version of themselves that the love is calling them toward. The avoidant's genuine deep love does not go to the person who tried hardest. It does not go to the person who is most patient, or most accommodating, or most willing to absorb the costs of the avoidant's fear. It goes to the person who is most fully, most completely, most uncompromisingly themselves, and who love the avoidant from that wholeness rather than from the diminishment that the avoidance dynamic so consistently produces in the people who love them. It goes to the person who made peace with their own darkness and therefore could witness the avoidance, who was interested in the actual mind and therefore made the performance feel unnecessary, who loved without the invoice and therefore made love feel safe for the first time, who lived without waiting and therefore made the avoidance choosing feel like a genuine choice rather than an obligation. It goes to the person who did not need the avoidant to be ready in order to be whole, and in not needing it, created the only conditions under which the readiness had any real chance of arriving.